Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. Today we're going to be sharing some creepy and downright unexplainable stories from viewers just like you. These viewers claim to have encountered what they call Skinwalkers and Wendigos. I don't know about you, but Skinwalkers never know when to go. Anyway, joining me today is my good friends from the Mailtopia podcast. He read story number 2 today, and if you enjoyed his voice, be sure to check out their podcast. They share scary stories all the time. You can find the link to do so in the description down below. If you have a story you'd like to share in a future video, whether it be a Skinwalker or a Wendigo story, I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Submit that at swampdweller.net. Now, hit that like button, be sure to subscribe, and sit back, relax, and prepare to get spooked. So, a long while ago, me and my very close friend got bored and decided to discover the nearby woods. We lived in a secluded area where we had thick forest around us for miles, and frankly, the rural area was boring. We had no one from our age and no internet, so while we were sitting aimlessly, we decided to pack some stuff up and wander into the woods. Now, my friend is a huge guy, mainly because he's obsessed with bodybuilding. So it was a bit hard for someone to scare him, but as we walked in, we both had an eerie feeling that we were being watched. The mood was tense, and strangely, the woods were dead silent. No birds chirping, no wind, and no sound of an animal or insect, not even a cricket. Approximately after 20 minutes of nothing but scaring ourselves, we heard a bark. Where I live, we have stray dogs both in the streets and in the wooded areas, and the ones that are in the wooded areas are not as friendly as the ones in the streets, because they are mainly very hungry. We stopped in our tracks and paid close attention to where the sound was coming from. It was coming from our left, and sounded pretty close. However, as the bark kept on, we both realized there was something off about it. I don't know how to put it into words, but it was almost like someone was trying to impersonate a dog, doing a very good job of it, but not at the same time. Then, we realized another odd thing about our supposed canine friend. The bark was repetitive, like it was playing on a speaker on repeat. Then, we realized another odd thing. My friend said that something is off, and he is genuinely creeped out, and I'm not gonna lie, I was shaking. You might say that it's quite natural to get creeped out in the woods when odd things like this happen, especially in the middle of the night out in the middle of nowheres, but this was different. Every single fiber on our bodies wanted us to get the heck out of there, and we were way too scared to move. Finally, I told my friend to run, and quite reluctantly, he obliged. We ran like our lives were depending on it, and still felt like that thing was chasing us. We were out of breath when we found our way back, and my buddy said he heard branches breaking as we were hauling out of there, and he was on the verge of crying hysterically out of pure fear. The strangest thing, however, is the fact that we both live in a country that has nothing to do with America, let alone Native American culture. What do you think was chasing and stalking us back there? Do you have any similar experiences? From what I can find online, it really matches the Skinwalker lores. But as I said, we don't even live in America, so could that even be possible?
Before I tell you what happened that night, let me tell you who I am and when this happened. My name is Tyler. I'm 16 and I'm a junior at a semi-private school. This event happened 2 years ago, almost 3 now, so bear with me on the details. The memories from that night are still a little foggy. But anyway, here I go. It was 2017, late October, I think. I had just gotten home after a long day of school. I decided to hop on my PS4 and play some Call of Duty Black Ops 3 with some online friends. As the hours passed, old and new friends had come and gone, and I was home alone for the week because my mother and father went on a business trip to Georgia, as well as visiting some family. It wasn't the first time I had to be home alone for a long period of time. I usually went to bed around 9:30. But since it was a Friday and I was home alone, I decided I would stay up. 9:30 came, and then 10, and then 11, then midnight, so on and so forth. You get the point. My eyes felt heavy and were foggy because of how long I was playing the video game, but the fact that I was wearing contacts didn't help either. I decided to check the time since I knew that it was getting late. It was 1:20 a.m. I was in a match, so I didn't want to get up and turn everything off. I decided that I was going to finish up the current match, and then I was going to go to bed. As I was finishing up the match, a putridly bad and musty smell hit my nostrils. To be honest, it tensed me up for quite a bit, and I gagged at how bad it was. I knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep through it, so I played a couple more matches, hoping that the smell would eventually go away. But that wasn't the case. Over time, minute by minute, it almost seemed like the scent was getting closer and stronger. I attempted to ignore it and continue to play my game. I have a noise-canceling headset, but I could swear that I heard footsteps from behind me. But then I remembered I had the 3D sound on as well. So, being me, I ignored it. Then I heard tapping. I took off my headset to confirm that it was the game. Then I heard it again. It was coming from the window behind me. It had shades over it, but with the outside light on, I saw a silhouette of something almost human-like. I stood in my room frozen in fear, looking at the silhouette, wondering if I was just delirious on sleep, but then its head ticked to one side like a bird, and it tapped on the window once again, in the same pattern. As adrenaline shot through my body, I decided, being the curious young teen that I was, to open the shades. When I got closer, the stench got stronger, and I could tell now that it was the smell of something decaying and dying. Could it be a dying animal that just so happened to stumble upon my window, I thought? But then I remembered the tapping and how in unison it was. I finally got the courage to pull back the curtains, and I wish I hadn't. It had a human face, but where the eyes were supposed to be, there were just sockets. It had sharp teeth so jagged I could swear it could tear through steel. Its face was decomposing and rotting. It looked like it had been dead for such a long time. I stood from where I had opened the window shades in fear. I couldn't take my eyes off of this thing. I didn't know if it was looking at me or not because of its empty, soulless eye sockets. Then it tilted its head with a sharp movement that startled me, and I screamed. It got up with so much speed, and then it went back into the woods. I saw its body and how contorted it was and how awkward it moved. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night, or weeks even. I haven't seen the thing since that day. And I'm only sharing this now because in class a couple of weeks ago we learned about Native American cryptids, and the Skinwalker fit the description well. The only thing off is that it usually takes the form of the things it has killed. My question is, who is the person it killed to take their form? I just hope that's the only time I ever see that thing, because who knows what it might do if we ever cross paths again.
I live in Utah, more northern, not Navajo Nation, but I'm only about 3 hours from the Adamtanium Skinwalker Ranch, for a reference to how close I am to Skinwalker territory. I live in a neighborhood on the very top of the mountain. Surrounding my neighborhood is just the mountains and nothing else, so basically just a neighborhood carved into the mountainside. Only clearings were houses and yards. Everything else was very wooded. Anyways, I'm not scared of the forest or mountains at all. I don't mind being alone. The only thing that worries me is other humans, and cougars sometimes. As I am a young girl, I've slept in the mountains a lot with my dad's dog and a friend. Sometimes, the dark spooks me, but not dark forest or anything like that in particular. I'm pagan and really big into spirituality and connection with nature and the earth, so, for the most part, I find comfort exclusively when I'm outdoors. So when I do feel uneasy or afraid when I'm in nature, I always feel like it's for a good reason. I never ignore it. I usually get home from work pretty late, around 10:30 at night. This whole drive home I came upon the mountain. I was feeling really uneasy this day, and I was dreading getting out of my car and walking into my house. I do have a fear of skinwalkers and entities alike, and I know that attracts them, so I always try to shake those thoughts off as soon as they enter my head. But they always do. That night was no different, but I felt like my fear was for a reason. I didn't want to be outside for a second longer, so I just got out of my car and ran to my back door. I was so nervous. It was that horrible feeling where you feel like if you look behind you, something horrible will happen. Nothing did, luckily. I locked my doors and went to sleep. That night was normal. In the morning, however, I went outside and there was a bone fragment outside of my house near my porch. Not saying it was human, probably animal. It looked like it came from a large bone. But yet again, it was just a piece. Probably a deer. I know I live near coyotes and predators, and there's probably a logical explanation for this, but the bone was dry, not previously removed from something. It was old and it had no meat or blood on it. It was just weird that it showed up overnight. And that's not the last thing though. There were creepy markings on it, like somebody had carved into this bone. And it wasn't there the day before, I know that. I don't have a dog at this house, so it wasn't anything that was dug up or something like that, you know? Just a weird feeling the night before, and then the creepy bone with markings on it. Super creepy. I did talk to some Navajo friends, and they have mentioned that they have heard stories from elder folk who talk about being cursed by skinwalkers in the same way. So I'm really hoping that's not what happened to me. This was around 3 years ago. I was 10 and my older stepbrother was 11. My dad and stepmom just got married, and I and my older stepbrother were home alone at around 5:30 a.m. or so. We were watching Netflix, but it buffered constantly. So us being the impatient kids we were, decided to go outside and practice bow shooting, which is what we did a lot. We got out there, and everything seemed okay. There was a lot of dew on the ground and the sun was just coming up. We walked for about 2 minutes to our little spot we made for our bow/firearm practice. We had fired a few arrows, then my stepbrother started acting skittish, but took 2 more turns. And when his turn came for a 3rd time, he turned white and said, "I think I'll sit this one out." Which I thought was weird, because he was so eager to get out there. I shot a few more arrows, and he shook me and pointed at an old burn pile a good deal away. A white, lifeless-looking face was half peeked out from behind it. Me, my stepbrother, and the creature stared eye to eye at each other for what I think was around 2 minutes, until my stepbrother moved his foot onto a twig and broke it, and I guess it scared the creature because it made a sound I'll never forget. It was a screech that sounded like a panther being murdered by a screech owl. I remember running inside and locking the door until my dad got home. All I can say is we didn't go outside alone again for a very, very long time after that. I know the story was short and maybe not the scariest thing you've ever read, but thank you for sharing it, Swamp Dweller. I recently started researching skinwalkers as I'm a big horror fan, and body horror is what scares me the most. As I'm reading stories, I am noticing scary parallels to what I saw as a child. I was in the woods outside my house with my dog, and each time I went in, I'd go in further, and this time was the furthest I had ever gotten. I found a sort of broken down brick building. It was only big enough to be some kind of shed, and only had 3 walls, which were really only about 4 feet tall. On the outside of the structure were a pile of deer skin. and on the inside were deer bones. It was a really long time ago, so I could be remembering something wrong, but I specifically remember there being no meat on those bones. I booked it home and decided not to go back into the woods, at least not with it just being me and my dog. Later on in life, some of the local kids come up and ask me to go into the woods with them because one of them had apparently seen something weird. So I tag along and we eventually make it pretty deep when we all see this creature crawling up a hill. I should clarify that the woods here sort of form a V shape with a creek running down the center. We were on one side of the V and it was on the opposite. It looks like it could have been some sort of dog with very short white hair like a greyhound, or a dog with no fur at all. It was super pale and quite lanky. The joints were normal like a dog would be, but they just looked distorted and wrong. The hind legs looked normal, but its front legs bent more like a person dragging itself. It was having trouble climbing the hill as it was fall, and it looked like it kept sliding down from the dead leaves covering the ground. It was broad daylight, but we all unanimously were scared crapless and decided to book it back home. This was back when I was in middle school, and nothing has happened since then. I also have never returned to the woods since. Now mind you, the woods are by no means in the middle of nowhere here. We were easily only a 3-minute sprint away from a neighborhood, no matter what direction we went. So it could have easily been a runaway dog and something just maybe hit it like a car or something, I don't know. Fear made me think it was worse than it really was probably. But that's why I'd like to hear others' opinions on this. So first off, I would like to say that this is 100% true. Now, weirdly, while this whole story involves me, I didn't witness a thing. So some pretext. I have been vacationing at private campgrounds my entire life. My family owns property in the Mohawk Trails not too far from Heath, Massachusetts. Beautiful land, historic property. Everywhere you go you can see some stone structures and property lines dating all the way back to the time of the Mohawk Indians. As I said, I've been camping there my entire life and still do. Nothing ever happened, paranormal at least, till this time around. Go back for about 5 years. My brother still calls this my Skinwalker story, although I'm not totally convinced. It is weird though. So 5 years ago, me, my brother, and my 2 cousins were camping for a weekend. It was very calm and peaceful. I was at the private lake fishing off the dock, not catching anything good. I caught a pickerel and tossed it into the woods. I continued fishing. Suddenly, I hear, "Josh!" my name come from the right. It was from a good distance away, so it was pretty faint. Now, where the dock was, if I looked right, I could see an expanse of land that wraps around the lake. There were trees and shrubs blocking my view of the path. That's where the voice came from. I recognized it as my little brother, so I call back, "I'm on the dock." I see him around the corner and he stares at me bewildered. He looks back into the woods and back at me, so I ask him, "What's up?" "Were you just in the woods? Like, running through the woods?" He looked bewildered. "No," I said. "How could I be there and be back here so quickly?" I replied. He looked back and then at me again and says, "Dude, I just saw you there, but you were running that way." He points back in the direction he came from, but I couldn't hear twigs snapping or leaves rustling. That's the weird part. Mind you, back then I was around 290 pounds. I was a big guy. I'm now down to 210 and in the military, proud to say, but that's besides the point. Now, remember how I said I threw a fish in the woods? I then realized I could no longer hear it flopping around anymore. I threw it in around 5 minutes prior, so I go back to look for it, and it's completely gone. I searched for a 30-foot radius and it was just gone, and there was no sign of animal life coming through and grabbing it. So that was very odd, and to this day my bro tells the story. Then, that same day my mother comes up to me at our site and asks me, "Josh, did you go into the female shower room at the rec hall?" She was very upset, even though I didn't. I say no, are you insane? Why would I go in there? Apparently, she was trying to find an explanation because I found out a few days later she followed what she thought was me into the shower room, and this figure was nowhere to be seen when she entered. Lastly, something not involving me, my two cousins were from different sides of the family, and they didn't know each other all that well. So the last night we were there, my cousin, who is a female, we'll call her Carrie, wakes up in bed. The sun is beginning to rise. She turns over and sees my other cousin, we'll call him Jose, sitting in a chair and listening to headphones staring out the window. She turns back over and tries to fall asleep, but she can't. She feels uncomfortable since they don't know each other, so she turns back and he is completely gone, like just disappeared in thin air. Later on, it turned out he never even left his bed. He was still asleep. Hey Swamp, this is a short but very interesting Skinwalker story. So at my uncle's funeral, we were telling stories about Skinwalkers. Now keep in mind right now we are in Oklahoma, but the first part of this story took place in Arizona. So further on, we were telling stories and my mom's boyfriend walks up and starts telling a story. And he said one time when he was about 17 years old, he was partying with friends out in the middle of the desert. And then his ex-girlfriend got upset at one of his friends. So she walked about a mile down the desert road, and he felt bad, so he drove to get her in his old Camaro and hopped out and said, "Hey, you want to walk around for a minute? Just us?" And she says yes, so they walk around for 5 minutes. He says, "You ever heard of a Skinwalker?" And she says yes, and so he told her that they were attracted to you if you talk about them apparently, and she just laughs it off. They decide to walk back to his Camaro, when all of a sudden this funky looking man walks out of the middle of nowhere in the pitch black desert and says, "Hey, can I get a ride?" My dad said he never hopped in the car and drove away faster with his ex, and so that was the end of his first story. Now part 2, he told us about this big black dog that used to come around and throw his Mastiff and St. Bernard around like rag dolls. He said one day he shot at it and the dog never came back. The very next day we were driving in the middle of the nowhere, like where houses wouldn't be for miles in Oklahoma, and all we saw was this big black dog on the side of the road, staring at us. And boy did I almost pee my pants anyway. Thanks for sharing the story, Swamp. I know it's a bit short and anticlimactic, but I guess not all Skinwalker stories are necessarily terrifying, huh? Hey Swamp, this isn't the longest story, but it is one I won't ever forget. To give the scene, I live in Missouri, close to a big lake in the woods. One night, I was outside smoking a cigarette, as I usually did before bed. This night was pitch black as there was heavy overcast and no other lights turned on. I would always hear the normal night sounds, coyotes, owls, and the like. This night, however, I was hearing a rather strange grunting sound that almost sounded like a dying cow at first. Not too worried, just yet, I continued with my smoke and listened intently from the porch. The sound was seeming to get closer, and I ran inside to get my father, as he would usually know what this is, because he would usually like to sit outside and watch strange lights and whatnot in the sky, as he is a big fan of the paranormal as well. As we listened to this strange grunting, it was definitely getting closer by the minute. It sounded like as if a large animal was running through the woods, as you could hear the limbs and trees breaking. Really freaking out at this point, we look at each other, like what the hell? Thinking we're about to have this thing in our front yard, we step back to the door to make sure we have a quick escape if need be. Whatever it was, sounds like it is definitely bipedal. This creature was about to make its way into our field, but was stopped by our high voltage fence we have for our horses. You could hear the snap as whatever it was touched the fence. With a loud roar, it ran back off the way it came. We could hear it pushing through the woods like twigs. I don't know if it was a Bigfoot, a Skinwalker, a Dogman, or what, but it was too close for comfort, and I always think about it any time I'm outside at night. My father and I still talk about it from time to time and speculate what it might be. A couple of years ago, I lived in a small town in Michigan. Me and my stepbrother, who we will call G and J, were going to go fishing one day on our landlord's lake. So we got on our bikes and started to ride down the path from our house, but we didn't even get halfway before we felt like we were being watched and were hearing something run in the corn beside us. Suddenly it just stopped. I was freaked out, but we kept on going till my older stepbrother hit the brakes on his bike so hard that I hit his back tire with my bike, and he said, "Look up ahead. Do you see something, or is that just me?" Me and my little brother Jay looked where he was pointing, and we saw something in the bushes beside the path just standing there, rocking back and forth. My little brother Jay dropped his bike and started crying. Me, being the hard-headed kid, thought it was nothing, so I started pedaling my bike ahead of G, my older brother, who kept looking back and mocking them, saying, "It's probably just part of the bush." Man, I wish I was wrong. The second I got closer, I smelled something so bad and felt complete dread come over me. The thing is, I knew what it could be, but how? It's Michigan and nowhere near a native reservation. Why would a Skinwalker be out there? I stopped dead in my tracks as soon as I heard it mock me in a real hoarse version of my voice. "It's probably just the bush." I completely lost it. I dropped my bike and so did my brother. We ran as fast as we could, back down the path to our house. We heard it in the back of the corn. I don't know why I wasn't screaming, but I was thinking about my brothers the entire time. I was thinking about the times we argued and the times we stood side by side as little schoolyard scraps. I didn't want to lose them. I didn't want to die. And that thing was only after one person. Me. But why me? It was keeping at my pace the entire time. If I slowed down, it slowed down. My older brother G noticed this and was obviously still scared, but pulled me to his left side to keep me away from the corn. He was putting himself between me and the thing until we ran into the house. It was empty because my dad and their mom were at work. We locked the door behind us and ran upstairs just to hear a loud screaming coming from the cornfield. My little brother Jay was still crying and I hugged my brother G, who was just shaking. He grabbed his youth 20 gauge shotgun and kept us close to him in our upstairs room until our parents got home. We didn't mention anything to them, but we also never went to get our bikes. I was on a walk about a month ago, and I was almost home. I saw something that looked like a white, golden brown husky with bright blue eyes, but something just felt really off about it. Its face seemed longer than a regular dog's, if that makes any sense. Its color was also kind of off for a husky. I don't really remember much about its body because of how freaked out I got. I wasn't exactly sure what to do, so I tried to act like I didn't feel that anything was off. Unfortunately, I accidentally made eye contact with it and stopped walking for some reason. I just felt too afraid to move. It was about 10 feet away, and it walked up to me and then past me. We maintained eye contact, even as it was walking past, until I heard someone else on the street, and when I looked back at the thing, it was running away, but it was no longer a dog. It was now a deer. I don't really see many deer anymore. That's the only way I can describe this. I don't know how it could have shapeshifted or changed so fast. It was almost like, I don't know, I guess it was like prancing in a way, the way it was leaving. Like, if you've ever seen Bambi, the way they prance around. I would have thought I had just seen a regular coyote if it was not for the coloring, and the almost human-like eye contact, and the awful feeling I got when I saw it, and then the sudden transformation from a dog to a deer. Does anyone know if I saw a Skinwalker? Or if not, does anyone know what I saw? Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright unexplainable Skinwalker and Wendigo encounters. I don't know about you guys, but I hope to never run into any of these creatures while I'm out exploring the woods. One of my favorite things to do is to just walk trails out in the middle of state and national parks, or even just go into the woods alone sometimes. Let's just hope I never run into a monster of my own. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a Skinwalker story or something else, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp, and stories like yours to help keep this channel going. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you enjoyed my guest reader today from Mailtopia Podcasts, be sure to check out their channel. You can find the link to do so in the description down below. It would be very much appreciated if you would subscribe and show them some love. If you're not aware, you can bring your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories with you everywhere you go. You can download them on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher Radio, and just about every other major podcasting platform out there. It really does mean a lot that you guys can take these stories everywhere and that you do choose to do so. If you made it all the way to the end, be sure to comment the code word down below to let me know that you did, and to confuse anybody who didn't. Today's code word is Purple Viking. See you guys soon with another creepy video.